Well, as the Trump presidency winds down and everyone from Congress to law enforcement to the press tries to clean up the mess, an old theory has resurfaced that the media's failure to forcefully call out and condemn Trump over these past 4 years is part of how we got here. From the day he rode down that escalator to announce his candidacy, media scolds were warning the press not to take the bait. Now, one presidential term later, some media commentators say the fury of the last 4 years was all avoidable.
Donald Trump and his mob succeeded in getting this far because we, the media, failed. We failed you.
That's NBC Peacock host Mehdi Hasan saying the media took Trump's bloviating, racism, and nonconformity in stride.
It was clear that we shouldn't normalize him, but we did. We gave him a pass again and again.
The Washington Post's Margaret Sullivan agrees, writing, "Decision makers took years to allow the words racist or lie about Trump, and journalists allowed him to play assignment editor by pivoting to magnify his insults or distractions." Really? I don't remember most media outlets being that reluctant. Every non-conservative columnist in the country has written about Trump's racism and lack of morality. And some reporters weren't shy about calling him a liar or making stuff up.
It has been a busy day for presidential statements divorced from reality.
You're concocting a national emergency here in order to get your wall.
There are those that say you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the books.
Manuals?
Over the past 4 years, the media was uniformly outraged over Trump's comments and actions on everything from Charlottesville to kids in cages at the border to his special people who stormed the Capitol. I'd argue it was the truth tellers that gave fuel to Trump's enablers, not a lack of them. So, John, I really believe that the louder the media spoke, the more they called out Trump, the more criticism they gave him, it really encouraged and fomented his base. And that's why we're here. You know, I listened to all of Mehdi Hasan, who I like, you know, I follow his show, but, you know, that was a gross exaggeration that the media has failed. And he was largely saying that it's mostly journalists of color who really understood what Trump was all about. I'm not buying that either. You know, that soundbite from Scott Pelley saying Trump was divorced from reality was 4 years ago. It was right at the beginning of the term. So I'm just not buying it. It's a nice theory, but I think Margaret Sullivan's wrong too.
Yeah, I normally don't disagree with Margaret Sullivan, but this time I do. I have little to add to your analysis other than to point out a couple of quick things. CNN, which was probably the leading mainstream media culprit in getting into bed with Trump during the campaign. Thank you a lot, Jeff Zucker, for all of your gifts to our democracy, and hyped it and carried his rallies endlessly on end. They evolved to the point where now prime time on CNN, which was generally an oasis of fairly straight-ahead reporting, is now one host after another teeing off on Trump at great length and in great detail. They dropped their Trump sycophants as commentators. So I think overall you're right. But I think you're also right that it was a red flag goading on the real Trumpkins. The more the media came out and said he's a pathological liar, he's doing this, that, and the other thing, the more excited they got because they exist not in a universe driven by policy, but in a world driven by grievance. And the lamestream media antipathy towards something is all the excuse they need to embrace it.
Look, I do think there has been failure on the part of news organizations. And the key word I want to highlight, what John just mentioned, was they evolved, speaking about CNN. You know, for the first couple of years, it was, hey, let's have fun with this. Every time he tweeted something, it was carried. Every time he did an event, they would carry these events live. Yes, they curtailed a lot of that, but we were already deep into a lot of this misinformation or the attack on the media, you know, throughout from the beginning to sort of the middle or maybe even to the third year of his administration. And I believe that news organizations should have started applying the brakes much sooner. You know, maybe not carrying those press conferences or live events wall to wall, but just dipping in when there was something of substance. maybe not highlighting some of the reactions of people in the audience and the back and forth with reporters, just emboldening them and feeding this frenzy that spilled over into social media. I won't say that, look, had everybody been responsible from day one, that this wouldn't have happened. But I do think that it could have been tempered if we didn't jump in with all of this coverage full-time, 24/7 for so long in this administration.
All right, so I'm going to echo Dan, because I sat in this chair for a long time and we debated whether we could say lie. Yes, we did. And that was early on. It took a couple of years before that got to be something that journalists felt like they could say, even looking at the facts of it all. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I've been sitting in this chair saying this for I don't know how long. You don't have to carry everything the man says. We have all kinds of outlets to respect the fact that he held the office of presidency, to make sure that we attended to those events in which he was supposed to be presidential, and make sure that we paid attention to that and got that out there. But all the rest of that stuff, the quantity of it, no, we did not have to do that. That's the failure. And so it means, Emily, that even though there was some very good journalists and journalism done saying and calling out these things, it really amounted to a drop in the bucket when you started adding up the massive amount of coverage day in and day out. You know what's been fabulous? The last few days, no coverage of the tweets. It's like silence.
There is no tweets. Yeah. Well, he is the president. Go ahead, Lylah.
I remember those conversations about whether to use the word lie. Do we ascribe an intent to somebody's words? And there was a lot of thought about the process of how we describe things, but little thought to what we were actually throwing up there on air. I don't think it's fair to say that the media is to blame completely, that the media enabled it. Did we enable Clinton or Bush or Reagan or any other charismatic leader that we've had just by showing what they're doing and saying? I'm not so sure. But I think that the media isn't a monolith, for one thing. And I think that broadcast media especially has evolved to focus more on confirmation than it does on information. We tended to present sound bites that provoked outrage because then people tuned in. And so I think that that's self-serving in a lot of ways. And I've said it before, outrage is clicky. So people focused on the outrage, whether it was coming, whichever side of the aisle it was coming from.
Everything he said was outrageous, and that's why the media had to cover it, if you ask me.
I think ultimately, though, the person to blame for his actions are him.
Yeah, all right.